How's it going, guys? Just getting the live feed going for the first time today. And then I noticed that Canon has released some pretty interesting news. We'll jump into that here once we get a few people in the chat room. And so Nikon comes out with their mirrorless camera last week, and now Canon has, or at least there's been some images leaked, and as well as some specifications leaked of the new EOS R that's coming from Canon. And it's kind of interesting, and we're going to jump into that here in a second. So as you come into the chat room, as you start watching the live feed, please let me know. Make sure that my audio and video is working as it should. And I've been trying to get this off the ground today, and it's challenging. So once we get a couple people in here, we'll jump over to it. So let's do this. Pop out the chat. And then as you guys come in, let me know. So let's jump over to the Canon Rumors page here. And this is where basically they've released some of the very first images coming from the EOS R. That's what they're going to call it. And interestingly enough, one of the specs that they've released is that this thing is going to be, it's either 530, let me not lie to you. It's 580 grams. And so that, which is, sounds really light. And so I went over and I looked at how heavy my my A7 III that I have coming, my A7R III is, and it's actually quite a bit lighter than my Sony's, which is surprising. That's not the route that Nikon took. I'm not sure exactly how heavy or light the Z6 and the Z7 are, but I'm pretty sure they're heavier than the Sony cameras. The Canon is going to be lighter. Also, when you're looking at these very first images that come from that we have here, notice the space around this grip. It looks like it has a grip that protrudes quite a bit. You can kind of see it here, so you have something to grab onto. Another interesting thing is that they have a fully articulating screen, and that's been something that people have complained about a whole lot, that a lot of these cameras that are coming out don't have the fully articulated screens. They only have flip screens. Of course, if you're somebody that's vlogging much, the fully articulating screens are really, really nice because you can actually see yourself. So that's pretty interesting. I see we got some people popping into the chat. Feel free to say hello and let me know if everything is working, because live feeds are interesting. So we're talking about the EOS R, and the first images have been leaked, as well as some of the first legitimate specs. We're looking at a 30 megapixel full frame sensor. It's going to have dual pixel AF. It's going to have negative 6 EV autofocus, which is far more than any camera I've even heard of. I've heard of E4 or negative 4 EV with the D850. -6, that's ridiculous. That's really low light focus. That's incredibly low lit. 4K video, that's a asterisk, because just because it has 4K video doesn't mean that it's going to be in a format that is actually usable. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be cropped. Very interested to see what happens there. Touchscreen LCD. I've found the Canon touchscreen LCDs to be really well implemented. On my 5D Mark IV, the touchscreen was excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Keith. On my 5D Mark IV, the touchscreen was excellent. You could touch to focus and take a photo. Can't do that on the Sony. I believe you can on the Nikon. I'm not exactly sure, but Canon has always done a really good job with touch screens. And for that to be a fully articulating touch screen, that's pretty exciting, especially combined with the dual pixel AF. That's exciting. We have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Canon Wi-Fi, have found, at least the app, I've found to be much better than my Sony. Dust-proof, drip-proof. That doesn't exactly sound super weather sealed. It seems like different terminology than what they've done with their DSLRs. I'm pretty sure they've said weather resistant, but all of this is just, you know, it's different terminology can be so open-ended. Magnesium body. It's using the same batteries, I believe, as the Canon 5D Mark IV, as well as 7D Mark II. Using the same LPE6Ns, which is nice for those people that own a whole bunch of those batteries. It's going to have a battery grip available with it. It's going to be lighter than a Sony a7 III. The inner diameter of the flange is 54 millimeters, which is really close to what the EF mount is. But it will require an adapter. So we're finally confirming that it is in fact going to have an adapter. I believe this is what that adapter looks like. Some of the other images that we have, that looks ridiculous, but according to this, it's going to focus well, but you know, of course they're going to say that. But look at the size difference. This must be, I can't tell if that's a 5D Mark IV or a 1DX Mark II. But look at the size difference here. They've also went with that updated LCD screen, just like Nikon has. I think that's really smart. Mode dial. Where in the hell is the mode dial? You notice it must have some form of digital mode dial, because we don't have the big mode dial that we're used to seeing on the top. That screen looks pretty cool. Looks like it has a pretty large grip, although when I look at that, I don't know if that's the most comfortable looking grip, but how can you tell from a photo anyways? But here you see we have this interesting left and right toggle, and there's no joystick for moving focus points. So that tells me that we're going to have some way of moving focus points, probably with the LCD screen, where you can use your thumb on the LCD screen to move focus points. Otherwise, that's going to be pretty clunky, because anytime you're moving focus points, you want to have that joystick, and not having that joystick, that sucks. But according to this is not going to be the highest end of these. But I have to say that, you know, assuming that it focuses well and everything, and it's actually fairly functional, this is a pretty exciting looking camera. And kind of a bummer that I don't own any Canon glass anymore. But as we look at the images, you can see it's got the fully articulated screen. The back of the camera looks more like something you would see on a 6D Mark II or a 6D. The dials have definitely been dialed down. See what I did there? The dials have been shrunk. So that must be saving a lot of space. But it's a pretty small, quaint looking camera, and that's pretty interesting, but it's not a bad looking camera. It definitely looks better than probably the M50. I think I definitely prefer the look of the Nikon Z6 and Z7 personally, but this does look like it's going to have a lot of room around your fingers next to that grip. That's something that Sony isn't great at. You know, the Sony has a fairly small grip, not a lot of room for your fingers between the grip and the lens. Still pretty exciting, and I would be very interested to know what the video capabilities of this camera are going to be, whether it's going to be some kind of crippled 4K, if it's going to be in a weird, you know, video codec that you can't use with like a 1.6 crop. I'll be very interested to see if they're going to do something that is a step forward with their video capabilities and really take advantage of the 4K, because that is going to be important for a lot of people, because more and more people like myself are doing video. And with that fully articulating screen, if it has really good 4K, this is going to be a vlogger's dream. Full frame, dual pixel AF, fully articulating screen. It's going to be light, and I guarantee that the Casey Neistats of the world would be excited about this camera if it has a quality 4K. I know, so since I've switched to Sony, I've started filming in 4K, and even if you're not delivering your final video in 4K, it's really nice to have that option. For one thing, you can just punch in on video, or you can kind of recompose your shot later on if you decide that you don't really like the composition. You've got a whole lot of pixels to play with. You can just crop in a little bit, or you can just you deliver in 4K, and there's a big difference in resolution between 4K and 1080p. So this camera is looking pretty intriguing, and I would venture to say that it's looking far more intriguing than what Nikon released last week. I'm also very interested to know what's going to happen with Panasonic, because Panasonic has been absolutely dominating the videographer market with their GH5 and their GH5S. Is that right? And the notion of them moving into the full frame mirrorless market, that should make people like Sony pretty afraid, because I bet that they could dominate in full frame 4K video. They're pretty excellent. Any word if Canon will utilize the eye autofocus used in their old film cameras? Well, I have no idea about that. I know that was something that was lacking from the Nikon cameras. They have a face detection, but they don't have eye autofocus. And I can tell you from using the Sonys that do have the eye autofocus that it will spoil you quickly, because it is so nice to not have to put any effort into moving a focus point and trying to get that focus point right on an eyeball, where you can just like hit a button and it finds it no matter where they go. It is so nice. And it's one of those things that I feel like is, the next step in evolution as far as like camera technology. It's a big deal, especially if you're a portrait shooter. As an A7 III user, the number one complaint I have is that too small of a gap between the grip and the lens. Poor design. And I agree. I have both the A7 III, the A7R III, and especially if you're using an adapter like the Sigma MC11, there's not a lot of gap for these fingers between the lens and the grip. You need a little bit of width there. And when you put a MC11 on there, to make matters worse, they put the USB port right there where your knuckles are. So you're constantly banging your knuckles against that USB port little flap that keeps it closed. And I wish that I wouldn't mind a bigger, more roomy grip on the Sonys. That's for sure. But as a landscape shooter, I'm on a tripod most of the time anyways, so it's kind of like, I don't really care. It's not like a game changer for me, but if I was shooting handheld all the time, it would get old. It would get a little bit annoying. But having said that, we need to see how this camera is going to autofocus, because I can tell you right now that the Sony autofocus is excellent. I found it to be just as good as my Canons, but they're reporting here, let's go back to the specs. They're reporting that it's going to focus down to -6 EV. And that's going to be a first, because unless I'm completely wrong on this, the lowest or the dimmest focusing camera that I know of, I believe, is the D850, and I believe that is a -4 EV. And you guys should, like, if you have another window open, go double check me on that. I don't want to be spouting nonsense, but I'm pretty sure that one focuses down to -4. I think the 5D Mark IV in live view focuses down to -4, but I've never heard of -6. That is really low light focusing, and that's pretty exciting. I'm very interested to know what you guys think of these cameras. What do you guys think about what Nikon released? One of the things that we don't know is how many card slots this camera has. I don't believe we know that. Kind of funny how mad everybody is getting Nikon over the single card slot. And I agree. Like, if you're a wedding shooter that is photographing really, really important events where you can get sued if you lose images, you can't shoot with one card slot. You just can't. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, it's not the safest practice, but if you want to do it, you can. But I really think that this Canon camera is looking like a more solid release than the Nikons. But another thing is how is the image quality going to be? Because Nikon has been kind of dominating Canon for the last several releases of DSLRs with image quality. They're using Sony sensors, and for that reason, the sensors have been amazing dynamic range and low light capabilities. 5D Mark IV had really good low light capabilities. I'm sure this one will as well, but I'm curious to know about the dynamic range. Well, I guess we'll see. Very interested to see what you guys are saying. Any word on BSI sensor and IBIS? Yes, it does have, I believe it said, let's go double check here. I have heard that it's going to have in-body stabilization, but I'm not seeing it here. Man, if it does not have in-body stabilization, that could be, that could thicken this plot, and it's not saying that here. So I'm sure that if it did have in-body stabilization, we would be seeing it on these initial specifications, because they would be bragging about that pretty hard. I know that the Canon M50, the M6, the M5, those do not have a physical in-body stabilization. Those are stabilized digitally, where it's like cropping in and it's doing it all digitally, and it doesn't work very well. So if that's the case, that could, I don't know if it's a deal breaker, but it's definitely strike one, because in-body stabilization is a big deal, both for video shooters and for still shooters. I know with a 16-35, shooting at 16 millimeters, I'm able to get sharp shots down to like 1/5 of a second, which there's no way I could do that without in-body stabilization. Yeah, I would agree. Without the in-body stabilization, that would be a big mistake. But one of the most common things that people asked me when I switched to Sony, which has been a couple months now, is, Nick, why are you not waiting to see what Canon and Nikon release? Why not wait until to at least see what they're going to release? And at that time, what I told people was that I was really skeptical that either one of those companies, that their first release would be anything on par with what Sony already has. Because typically when you jump into a new design like full frame mirrorless, when you jump into a new technology, that first generation is going to have a whole bunch of problems. Maybe it's problems with a feature set where it's just missing important things, and they're kind of out of touch with what customers want. Or maybe it's just problems with, like, something just flat doesn't work right and it's buggy, or the firmware is wrong, or, the lens lineup. Lens lineup is another big deal with a new generation of technology for a camera company. So that's why I switched to Sony, is because I knew what they had, and there wasn't this big question mark as to what it was going to have and what was not going to have. I already knew what the feature set was. I'm skeptical that either Canon or Nikon are going to be able to check off all of the box, tick all the boxes. So yeah, no IBIS, but these are leaked specs, so it's probably not a full spec sheet. But that does look like a glaring oversight if it does not have in-body stabilization. Yeah, weight. And Jeff says that the weight says it all. Definitely no IBIS. That's probably why it's lighter, is because it doesn't have all of that stabilization mechanism. Interesting. So I'm curious to know what you guys think after this live feed. Go ahead and leave your comments below. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting once we know exactly all of the details on this camera, what it does and does not have. I'm very interested to know what the video capabilities are, and if it doesn't have in-body stabilization, that's worse than only having one card slot. But looks like at least this camera will focus. The Nikons, by the sounds of it, don't. It's always something. It's always something. It's. I would not want to be a camera manufacturer because it must be really hard to put everything into one camera, because it seems like every camera almost has everything, but it's lacking some. So very interested to hear what you guys think, and we'll catch you guys later next time. We'll see if I can successfully end this live feed. So take it easy, guys. Leave comments down below, and I'm very interested to see what comes of these cameras. Take it easy, guys.